It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Well, thanks for joining us, folks. I'm Sam Lesante. Another interesting show for you. We're trying to give you as much information as we possibly can. I want to tell you, I appreciate the comments on the shows. You know, we produce 21 local neighborhood programs. We've been doing it since 1994. And I'm very thankful the fact that you made the Sam Lesante Show #1 talk show in northeastern Pennsylvania. Schuylkill County, interesting things happening in Schuylkill County. We have a show called Modern Medicine, who is the host of the show is Dr. David Moylan, who is the Schuylkill County Coroner. He is here today to give us an update of what's happening in the county, and we are joined by his Deputy Coroner, Albert Barnes, who's been around a while, about 16 years. He tells me he's been in the coroner's office. Dave, nice to see you.
Sam, thanks for having us here. It's a real pleasure to be on the show
again. It's been a while. You must be a busy little guy because I don't...
Well, I want to bring you up to date on some of the activities that we've had recently through the coroner's office.
Well, what's happening in the coroner's office?
Well, a few days ago, we hosted a burial ceremony for veterans. And believe it or not, maybe it was always going on, but certainly is more prominent in today's society. But people will die and relatives will, well, some cases they have no relatives, but other times the family just doesn't step up and the county assumes the expenses for cremation and burial of these individuals. And my associate here, Bud Barnes, identified 4 cases of veterans. Again, they're basically pretty much homeless, and we normally will bury the cremains in a mass grave at the, used to be the county home, but now it's a nursing home that has cooperated with the county called Rosewood down in Schuylkill Haven. And every year or so we'll have a ceremony and a burial. But Bud identified 4 veterans that were in our care. And I'd like him to tell us a little bit about the ceremony that he arranged.
I think it's great what you did, Bud. Yeah, tell me about this ceremony.
We identified 4 unclaimed decedents that came through our office. I found that they had a military history, military background. I believe 2 of them were Korean and 2 are Vietnam veterans with some distinguished honors. So what we did is we contacted the local cemetery, which would be the Fort Indian Town Gap National Cemetery, made arrangements to have them placed there with all military honors. We will be holding a small service at our facility at the Simon Kramer Institute Chapel. We will have an honor guard, and we will be playing taps on the way out for them. We will also have a police escort down to the National Cemetery where the motorcycle escorts will be there waiting for them. And then the Indian Town Gap chaplain will have a service, and we will stay and act as their family to see that their remains are honored in the best of their
I think that's great.
Sam, it's the least we could do.
Oh my gosh, I think that's fantastic, really. Now you're looking for accreditation for the Schuylkill County Coroner's Office by the International Association of Coroners and Medical Examiners. What will that do for the county of Schuylkill?
Well, it would document our efforts in medical death investigation, and we feel that we've been on the cutting edge of such investigation with the introduction of the post-mortem CT scan. And to date, we've done about 2,200 cases, and it's just part of our routine investigations. We certainly don't do it on every case, but when we have a decedent that has no medical history, they just pretty much drop over. And this has been a very useful tool also in the documentation of trauma gunshot wounds, etc. Now, we still use the traditional autopsy, and we've got a great working relationship with Dr. Wayne Ross, who is the medical examiner for Dauphin County and Lancaster County, and he works with us under contract, and that's been a great relationship. But in the state of Pennsylvania, there's 67 counties. Only 6 of them have this accreditation, and we're working towards accomplishing this within the next year. But we've already had a site visit, and there were several recommendations, and we're addressing those and hope to have our final inspection before the end of the year.
Before the end of the year.
It's an interesting thing to find out when you mentioned about the coroner's office. Well, people just think you deal with dead people, of course, but the point is that since you've been in the coroner's office, and this is, I guess, these are facts, these are not just me just saying this, you've been able to save thousands upon thousands of dollars for the taxpayers in the Schuylkill office, in the Schuylkill County Coroner's office, which means that the more you're able to save, it's the less that the taxpayers who are getting hammered anyway are involved. But more than that, you're involved sometimes when you're investigating a death. There's a lot of complications that could come from this investigation. And that's where I think the experience that you have, Dave, and you're 16 years you've been there, it's critical for, I guess, the families or those people involved and how that person died, what it means. I mean, am I correct in saying that?
Well, certainly to get closure for the family is very important. My own brother died it's been about 30 years in an automobile accident in Schuylkill County. And getting closure, it was very, very important to learn what the details of the final minutes or hours were. It does bring some solace to the families. And I've extended to many families an opportunity to come in, sometimes to view the images from the postmortem CAT scan, sit down and review the autopsy findings, and translate the medical terms into English, pretty much. And I know many people have had closure there. But you've been involved in some of these family conferences. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, a lot of the families are looking for that final part, that final closure, and we seem to be able to give that to them by reviewing the scans, going over toxicologies, and other information that we've found along the way.
Can you learn something from, for example, a family member dies? I remember you had shown me visual autopsy, or was it? Remember, it was down in you. The guy died of a widowmaker, or whatever.
Yes.
Okay, I recall. But is there anything that when you're doing examination, or whether that you could say, look, there may be a history of this in your family that people didn't know about? Does that ever happen?
All the time.
Most definitely.
Is that right?
Yeah, Doc will point out to them that maybe this is something that they should be looking at as they get older, or as the decedent's children get older.
Heart disease, very common still in the United States. And what are the risk factors? Diabetes, high blood pressure, cigarette smoking. These are factors that you can control to a degree. Meticulous monitoring of the blood pressure, keep the sugar under control, and stop smoking. Not much you can do about hereditary, if there's premature coronary disease in your family, but you can modify lifestyle and other risks.
Yeah, I think that's so very important, and I think there's where the experience comes in with a coroner. Okay, you having the medical background and doing it for so many years, and you having the experience, Bud, it means a lot. We're going to take a break. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. 24/7. You can watch all of our programs, all of the shows we produce. Go on our website, ssptv.com, our YouTube channel for those of you who have friends all over the world. I have people watching our show in Italy and France and different places. It amazes me when people go on vacation for a while, they'll watch our shows. I have on the show today the host of Modern Medicine, who is seen here on SSP TV, Dr. David Moylan, and his deputy, Coroner Albert Bud Barnes. A lot of things have happened in Schuylkill County. COVID-19, the wonderful, fantastic pandemic. Give us an update on that.
Well, I'm going to qualify that, and it's probably part of my innate bias, the Wuhan virus.
Yes, yes.
And it certainly left its mark on Schuylkill County. We seem to be coming out of it. But since the inception of the pandemic, there's been 36,000 infections or cases in our county, which is almost 1 out of 5 for the population. But there were also 692 deaths that and we haven't investigated all of them, but we learn about some of them through cremation authorization requests. So whenever we see that there was a death where COVID was listed as a contributing factor, we've been getting medical records, and we're compiling a registry, and we hope to have a report forthcoming on it. But how many of these patients actually died of the COVID, or it wasn't just a fellow traveler? And Bud has been part of our investigation of these when patients are brought into the county morgue. But
when we bring in a decedent who we believe has COVID, we actually do what we call a presumptive. It's a 15-minute blood presumptive. We were one of the first counties in the state actually to have it. When we found it, we actually left it out to the Coroners Association, who then, informed all the other coroners' offices about it, and we basically depleted the supply that the supplier had.
What did you find?
We found a presumptive that does positive or negative for the antibodies and the stuff in the blood. So what we do is we take a small blood sample, and then we put a developer on it, and in about 15 minutes it'll tell us whether or not they have the antibodies or the COVID itself. The antibodies usually show up after the.
What did you find out of your cases? I'm really interested in knowing this.
Mostly, generally, most of the people who came in who basically passed away due to respiratory failure and all, probably 1 out of 2, 50%.
And we can correlate that serologic blood test
So
with what we
basically,
see on the CAT scan as far as the lungs
So they throw
go.
everything to COVID, okay? And so what happens is, it's very difficult for me to understand, and not being in your profession, that you have the political nonsense that's going on, and how you got to be delicate, because some people really did die from the virus, okay, and that was sad. Should have never happened in the first place, but you never hear about that, okay. But then you have the fact that there's a political point where saying, let's blame it on COVID because of financial or whatever, and I don't know how truthful they've been with the American public on that. Now, of course, they hate coroners who are saying they didn't die from COVID, they died from this, because if you're a political hack, which most of them are, they want you to believe in all this stuff. Now, it's there. I'm not saying it's not there. But you found some things that didn't relate to COVID.
Well, I'm going to say that I'll reserve a final judgment till we have our collation of these 690 deaths and see if we can slice that out and find out what's what.
Is there such a thing as flu anymore?
Certainly there is.
Yeah, is there? I mean, because I don't hear anything about the flu.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, I'm not downplaying this, and I get very very upset when I see the dictation of what some authorities are doing for our seniors. I personally think that you should be cautious, but I do think that they're scaring the bejesus out of them. I really think that they have the seniors petrified. It's just sad, David. It's so sad what I see happening in this country today.
Well, we hope to bring some science to this little microcosm in Schuylkill County and look at this finite number of cases.
Do they listen to people like you? You know, you're a professional coroner. You've done a fabulous job in the coroner's office. You've saved Schuylkill County thousands upon thousands of dollars. You have guys like Bud Barnes, who's been around for 16 years and has the experience that you need in the coroner's office. Do they listen to people like you, or sometimes they don't want to hear what you have to say? So oh, he's a nut. He's crazy. He's
Well,
this.
again, in our little microcosm, I have to take my cap off to the county commissioners in Schuylkill. They've been very supportive for our efforts.
Let's talk about the opioid epidemic.
I have some statistics I'd like to share with you and the viewers.
I don't think it's going to be good numbers.
Well, let's just look back to 2018 when I think this thing really got going. 79 drug-related deaths in our county. The next year, 2019, it was up to 94. Then we had a spike in 2020, 120 deaths. Last year it was 115. 6 months, almost 6 months into 2022, we're at 53. So we're surely break 100, especially when the holidays, it seems to be a spike at that point. And again, we investigate a lot of these with postmortem CT scans in which we see characteristic changes in the brain, in the lungs, and then it's supported by the toxicology, which comes back several weeks later. And I've made it a habit of bringing in family members so we can find out what's going through the mind of the person within the 72 hours before they died. Because yes, some of them could commit suicide, but if I can rule out that and certainly rule out natural causes from either an open autopsy or the postmortem CAT scan, I have to rule these as death at the hands of another human being. Whoever supplied them, you have to have an exchange of money, a gift, whatever. If that drug was delivered and the person dies, it's a crime in Pennsylvania.
Boy, I tell you, it's so sad. It's so sad. We had a horrific thing happen on Interstate 81 at Minersville exit, mass casualty event. That was amazing. So you have a little chronicle.
Well, this is the worst disaster that I've seen in my 10 years, and Bud said in his 16 years. But it was quite a tour de force. I'd like Bud to talk a little bit about it since he represented us on the scene.
Let me take a quick break and come right back, and this is the way we get into the show with this particular thing. We'll take a break right now. My friends, what you're looking at is a terrible, terrible scene. It's the mass casualty event, the Interstate Route 81 aerial view thanks to the courtesy of the Schuylkill County Coroner's Office, Dr. David Moylan, who is the coroner. He's here with his deputy, Bud Barnes, been there for 16 years. I'll tell you, this must have been horrific. Tell us about what happened.
Well, I'm going to tell you that it harkens back to the days of the war in the Middle East with the highway going out of Kuwait up into Basra in Iraq. And many soldiers of the Iraqi army were trapped there, and they were subject to horrendous casualties, and they called it the Highway of Death, and that's what this reminded me
March 28th, 2022. Bud, tell us about it.
It was a normal day, cold. We were in the office, and about 10:30, 11:30, somewhere around there, a call came in. There was an accident on 81 with multiple injuries, unknown deaths. We had gotten called up around 11:30 to respond because they had found some decedents. When we got there, we were on standby. Basically what was happening was snow squalls would come through, heavy winds. It would go from maybe 20 degrees down to below zero at some points, to where you couldn't even see 5 feet in front of you. It was pretty horrendous what we saw when we pulled up. Fire was doing their best to keep it under control. EMS was doing their best to get, whoever they could out. And then, of course, us being the last responders, waited until the scene was safe to get in. Yeah, we ended up with 6 decedents throughout the whole carnage. It was quite shocking to see in the beginning. So the problem we had was determining on how we were going to identify each decedent as we removed them from the wreckage.
That must have been a terrible experience.
Sam, there's 2 duties in the coroner's office. One is to report on the cause of the death, which was pretty obvious here. There was blunt force trauma and there was thermal trauma to the bodies. But the other is to come up with the manner of death. And another important function is identifying the dead. And Bud was very much involved in that. And how did we solve this?
We basically, as we removed the victims from the vehicles, we labeled each vehicle like the state police would do, vehicle 1, vehicle 2, and so on, and positions in the vehicle. Then what we did is, with the assistance of the state police, they actually pulled the vehicles apart to get the VIN numbers off of the frames of the vehicles, which made it easier to identify the tractor trailer trucks that were involved. Cars and stuff weren't so easy because Toyotas, a lot of the foreign cars, do not put VIN numbers on their frames. So when a vehicle does get that hot, VIN numbers melt, numbers disappear. And that's where we ended up using DNA samples.
They were that you couldn't recognize them?
No, sir.
It's burned beyond recognition.
What happened? I mean, was it a truck? The cars hit the truck, or I mean, what happened?
I don't know exactly what the initial ruling is, but I believe it started over a snow squall.
Yeah.
From clear roads to zero visibility.
And just like that?
Well, just like that, it was all over. I mean, we're talking, 80 cars all total, 2.5 miles worth of carnage?
If you're looking at the picture, my friends, you're going to see a yellow an orange, is that the orange truck?
It's an orange intermodal trailer that comes off of ships.
Okay, and that's where the major
Behind that, yes.
And they probably hit the truck and exploded?
Yeah, I believe it was a propane tank that exploded.
Oh my God.
That started the whole chain reaction.
Wow.
So we took, we were up there for about 17 hours until we finally removed the last of the victims.
Here again, it boils down to the experience that you have and those first responders. We had an event that Senator Argyle had, and all those we did a show there, and it was amazing. That's when you pay, like you, Dave. You bring to the coroner's office medical experience that you just throughout the years you've learned, and can save so many thousands of dollars, not only thousands, but help for families. You have something you want to say.
But I would like to conclude this whole experience with a quote from Tom Clancy in one of his techno thrillers called A Debt of Honor. And I thought it was very poignant, and it says as follows: "Of all human lamentations, without doubt, the most common is, if only I had known. But we can't know, and so days of death and fire so often begin no differently than those of love and warmth." Can you imagine what these people were thinking when they started their day?
Wow, it's just incredible. Well, thanks. It's nice to see you again, Dave.
Yeah.
Keep up modern medicine. You're doing a great job. And it's nice to see you and reminisce a little bit about your dad and many years ago what happened, in an invention he had. It was interesting. It's a small world. The coroner's office, Schuylkill County Coroner's office, my friends, you think nothing of it until you're affected. And then when it becomes a family member, you want to make sure you have the most experienced person that's going to be taking care of your loved one. And that's what Dr. Moylan and his staff has done since they've been in that office, in the Schuylkill County office. I know that firsthand. And of course, he hosts Modern Medicine, brings a lot of valuable information. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.